So in your notes, you're self-reflecting on 5-3. How did you feel about adding and subtracting fractions with different denominators? And today we're moving on to 5-4. And what are we going to be learning about today? Multiplying fractions. So today's lesson is all about multiplying fractions. So shade in to see it there. And then flip in your notes to 5-4. Now, when we're adding and subtracting fractions, the most important step is to get a common denominator first. When we're multiplying or dividing fractions, you don't need to do that. So when you are multiplying fractions, your first step, you can see up here, I've got step 1, is to multiply the numerators. So you're going to start by multiplying the numerators. Is the numerator the top or the bottom? Numerator, top or bottom? It's the top, right? The denominator, which is the second step, multiply the denominators. Denominator, D stands for down, so that's on the bottom. That's down on the bottom. You don't need a common denominator. When you multiply and divide fractions, you just multiply the numerators, multiply the denominators, and what do you think the final step is? Simplify if possible. Yep. That should say if possible. There was a typo. My bad. Simplify if possible. So for multiplying and dividing, we do not need common denominators. I highly recommend that you have out a handy dandy calculator. You are more than welcome to use calculators. And in fact, I'd prefer it if you did, just so you didn't make any little mistakes. So step 1, we have to multiply the numerators. So in my calculator, I have to type 12 times -5. A few people told me the other day they don't know how to type in a negative. So I'm going to type the 12, hit the times symbol. This button down here is the negative. Some people have been trying to use the subtraction as a negative, but it's not. Hit this button right down here where my pen is, and it'll put a little -5. And we get -60. That's step 1, multiply the numerators. Step 2, we have to multiply the denominators. So in my first denominator, I have 17 times 18. So I'm going to type 17 times 18. And I get 306. Now we have to simplify if possible. Those are some pretty big numbers that we're working with, correct? I'm looking at those numbers and I'm noticing both of those numbers are even. If we have 2 even numbers, what are even numbers always divisible by? 2. So let's go ahead and type into our calculator -60 divided by 2. And I'm getting -30. And then I'm going to type in 306 divided by 2. And I get 153. Can I divide by 2 again? No, because the second number is an odd number. So that doesn't work. So now we need to know, can we keep simplifying? What do you think we should divide by now? Let's try 3. Because we could do -30 divided by 3. And we get -10. Now let's try 153 divided by 3. And I'm getting 51. So I get -10 over 51. What are some numbers that 10 is divisible by? 2. Do you think 51 can be divided by 2? No, because it's odd. 10 can be divided by 5. Can 51? No, because it doesn't end in a 5 or a 0. So that's our final answer. Now, there are actually a few different ways that you can write that final answer. You guys will notice I took that negative and I put it in the numerator. And I'm calling it negative 10 over 51. Or you could also simply write a negative and then write the 10 out of 51 right next to it. So a lot of times the way that you'll see it on the NWEA or the PSAT or the M-STEP is they're going to write the negative in front of the entire fraction, because technically speaking, an entire fraction is what's negative, but it's a really good habit to get into to actually make the numerator negative. And that's going to come in handy when you get to algebra class. So that's kind of a habit I try to get you guys to start developing in 7th grade. Put that negative in your numerator. Always get in the habit of that, and that's going to make life easier in the long run. Nope, it's just a negative. Yes, go ahead. You could, but for this, we're working with fractions, so we only want to simplify them. Now, let's take a look at the second example here. Are you with me? All right, so we have negative 9/16. The first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to take the negative and I'm going to give the negative to the 9. And I'm going to rewrite that fraction as negative 9 divided by 16. So I like to start off by taking my negative and assigning it to my numerator. Now for my second one, it's also negative. So where am I going to put that negative? Where did I tell you to put it? In the numerator. So I'm going to call it a negative 12 over 21. On this question here, we can actually do something called cross-canceling. You remember cross-canceling from last year? Cross-canceling makes it a little bit easier to simplify our fraction. Very good. 9 and 21, those are across from each other. Negative 9 divided by 3 is a negative 3. And what is 21 divided by 3? 7. What can you divide those both by? Even bigger than 2? What's even bigger than 2? 4, yep. So what's 16 divided by 4? 4. What's negative 12 divided by 4? Negative 3. Good. Now let's go ahead and multiply. So simplifying just simply gives us a lot smaller numbers to work with in the long run. What's a negative 3 times a negative 3? Positive 9. Good catch, yep. And what's 4 times 7? 28. Yep, so we get 9 28ths. We got to look to simplify. What can we divide 9 by? 9 or 3. Could we divide 28 by 9 or 3? Nope. So this is my final answer. 9 28ths. Let's flip to our next page. And we're going to get through example 2. So example 2 says you are filling your pool for the summer. Your garden hose uses 4 3/4 gallons of water a minute. If you are filling your pool for 30 minutes, how much water is in it? So we can pump 4 3/4 gallon of water per minute. If we fill our pool for 30 minutes, we want to know how much water is in the pool. So we're going to take this 4 3/4 because we can get 4 3/4 gallon every minute. But how many minutes are we filling it for? 30. So we want to times by 30. And it really does take this long to fill up a pool, by the way. When they fill up, they put a garden hose in it and they fill it overnight. It takes all night, plus some more time. Yes, some people do. They just hire a truck to come in. You can get like the fire department or just any place that delivers water can come do it. You got to pay for it though. So we have 4 3/4 and we want to multiply by 30. In order to multiply fractions, we actually have to write them as improper fractions first. So this first fraction right here is what we call a mixed number. We want to turn it into an improper fraction. So what's 4 times 4? And what's 16 plus 3? 19. So I'm going to go ahead and rewrite that as 19 fourths. And the way we got that was 4 times 4 is 16. Plus 3 more is 19. And then, very good. Then let's put it under it. It would technically be 30 over 1. So we want to write that whole number 30 as a fraction. So 30 as a fraction would just be 30 divided by 1. Raise your hand if you see some cross canceling. You're looking to cross cancel. I'm going to give you a hint. What can 4 and 30 both get divided by? Who can raise their hand and help me out there? 4 and 30 divided by 2. Very good. What's 4 divided by 2? 2. So I get 19 halves times by, what's 30 divided by 2? 15 over 1. So now let's multiply 19 times 15. Are you guys getting 285? And what's 2 times 1? 2. What type of fraction is that? It's improper. So, if I want to write this as a mixed number, I'm going to type in, I've already got 285 up on my screen. Let's do 285 divided by 2. And I get 142.5. So my whole number is going to be 142. How do I write 0.5 as a fraction? 1/2. Very good. 142 and a half. Nope, not minutes actually. We filled up for 30 minutes and we have 142 gallons. Good. You don't think so? I made up these problems, so it might not be that accurate. I'm not sure. If you're filling your pool for 3 hours, how much water's in it?
Maybe 100.
So we can get 4 3/4 of a gallon a minute. If I'm filling my pool for 3 hours, how many minutes would that be? 180, right? So I'm going to go ahead and write 180 above the 3 hours because we're talking about per minute here. So we need to write that as 180 minutes. So we're going to take this 4 3/4 and we get 4 3/4 of a gallon per minute. We're doing it for 180 minutes, so we're going to multiply by 180. Ooh, good observation. Yeah, I like that. That's a good idea. I'm giving you a pirate ticket for that. That's great critical thinking. Yes, that would absolutely work. I love it. There you go, sir. I love it. I'm going to just keep doing it this way just because I already started. What do we have to do with our mixed number? And we already did that over here, didn't we? Hey, see how we wrote this mixed number as 19 fourths? So let's go ahead and write it as 19 fourths over here times by 180 over 1. Can I cross cancel? Yeah. Oh, wow. This looks similar. What can 4 and 180 both get divided by? 2. 4 divided by 2 is 2. What's 180 divided by 2? 90. Ooh, you could probably do that even further, couldn't you? What can 2 and 90 both get divided by? They both get divided by 2, right? Yep, 90 divided by 2 equals 45, yeah. And then in our numerator, we need to multiply 19 times 45. And we get 855. What's your denominator? 1. So what's your label? Gallons. Good.